Today, in current events from a Christian perspective, we take a look from a biblical perspective at illegal immigration. Illegal immigration. Since there are thousands of protests scheduled for today across America, and prominent Christians and many others are saying things that are just practically biblically untrue, even quoting scripture that's plainly out of context or cherry picked for their advantage. The rioters are claiming there should be no kings in America. And you can see by this image, they've put Donald Trump on it, saying that Donald Trump is functionally a king. Is that true? Is he acting like a king? We will investigate that claim. But of course, regardless of Trump or anyone else, this is a problem because there already is a king. There's the King of Kings, King Jesus. And some of these people are clearly not living as Christians. We'll look at all of this and more today. I'm Matt Odegaard, and this is Church Public. Hey, everybody, welcome back to Church Public. Really appreciate you. And if this is helpful to you, hit all the buttons, the likes and the subscribes and the shares and all that good stuff. I want to get into this content pretty quick here, but just remember that every bit of your support helps. If you're listening, if you're watching, if you want to check out the Substack at substack.com/@ Church Public, and you can view it there. You can support there if you like. Just really appreciate all of your help through this time as I try to bring you current events from a Christian perspective, because I talk to people out there. I talk to many of you out there, and not a lot of people are doing this. There's a lot of conservative media out there. There's a lot of other media out there, but bringing media from a Christian perspective, there's just not a lot, or at least the ones that are doing it seem to struggle with actually looking at their Bible and opening it and making sense of it all. So I'm here to help. I hope it is helpful. If it is, leave a like, a review, a comment, the stars, all that other good stuff. So today we are going to get into just some shenanigans that are going around. Obviously, I would think many of you have seen this image of the LA riots that occurred this last week and apparently are scheduled across the country this week. And this is the latest version of the fiery but peaceful protests. I did not clip, there was one clip that I heard that was, hey, some of these people are just having fun burning cars, and then, the authorities come in and turn it into a violent event. I'm sorry, no. Having fun and burning cars is not a thing. That's not how we do any of this. So we're just very confused about what these riots are about, what is a protest, what is the First Amendment, and really what I want to get to most, and we'll spend the most time on, is the Bible. What is biblical? What is scriptural? What is Christian? What is anti-Christian? And we want to look at all of those things. I know it's difficult to look at pictures like we just saw. We are now probably inundated with images like this online, on the socials, and all of the other places. And then I have heard and seen and read people from all avenues, including quote-unquote Christians, screaming about who is right and who is wrong. It's important to think biblically about this. It's important to think biblically about illegal immigration, deportation, immigration in general, because there is a difference in between illegal immigration and legal immigration, though the media, the left, politicians, but I repeat myself, all think that it's the same thing. Illegal immigration and legal immigration are the same thing, but of course they're not. So we want to make sure we hit those things as well. We need to think biblically. We need to think from a Christian perspective. And here's something to keep in mind as we're going through this, because you're probably already getting ready to throw your phone out the window because you're so mad at me for this. I would like to remind us all that when emotions get high, reasoning gets low, but we need to use our minds and think intelligently about all of these topics. And from a biblical and Christian perspective, we need to think with both grace and truth. You can say just, love is love, or love your neighbor, or whatever, and that is fine, but that is only half of the story. We need to know how to love our neighbor, and that is the truth part. So we need to understand all of these pieces and put them together. You can't just say, I love everybody, and then just let them do whatever they want to do. That's just chaos, and I, for one, don't want to live in chaos. And I would say, too, this whole Bible, which we'll look at shortly, some of it, begins with the very idea that God is not a God of chaos, but a God of order. So as we are in his image, we need to pursue that order, not pursue the chaos like so many are doing today. So we've been looking at this idea of no kings, this protest that's coming up, and this idea that America should not have a king. God is a God of justice and a God of order, as I just mentioned in the beginning. God created the heavens and the earth. He created this from chaos into order. It seems like those that are rioting are only interested in chaos. They don't want to have a king, so they want to just tear down the entire system. That's not helpful. What do you replace the system with? Of course, there is no suggestion of anything. It's just, we'll let things happen because that's just how things work. But no, of course, things can't work that way. The name of this nationwide protest is No Kings, and I know this is a statement about authoritarian tyranny, and they think that Trump is a tyrant, an authoritarian, but we haven't had a king for a couple hundred years. In fact, we have a holiday about that already, and it's July 4th. Because America doesn't want a king and they have never wanted a king. The funny part to me, because Trump is funny, if you can get to that point and realize that he's actually just a really funny guy who does get some things done and an incredible businessman at that, he himself weighed in on this idea about no king's riots. Let's listen to this.
Several No Kings protests planned across the country on Saturday as well. What are your thoughts on those?
What do they go? No kings?
No Kings.
I don't feel like a king. I have to go through hell to get stuff approved. A king would say, I'm not going to get this. A king would have never had the California mandate to even be talking to him. He wouldn't have to call up Mike Johnson and Thune and say, fellas, you got to pull this off, and after years we get it done. No, we're not a king. We're not a king at all. Thank you very much.
So, I mean, that ultimately should be the end of the story, and we don't really have to do any more, but I will. And the reason I will is I want to get to the Christian perspective and make sure we get to some Bible as we go through this time. But of course, Trump is not a king, and there's so many checks and balances and accountability built into the three areas of the federal government. Intentionally so. I mean, again, any person who has studied the federal government system for any length of time understands this is exactly how it works. What they don't like is not getting their way. So they're just a bunch of toddlers throwing a temper tantrum, and that essentially is what it is. The only problem is, of course, it becomes violent and dangerous for those that are involved or those that are trying to say, please stop burning everything down. So this is the reality of the world that we live in. We're just an immature society, and we just decide that we don't like something, and so we burn the system to the ground. But of course, that cannot be something that is good. That is not a civilizational good, regardless of how you feel about any of these issues. That's just not the way. The other problem here, and I don't want to get too spiritual right off the bat, but of course I can't help it, and that is that we actually do have a king. The King of Kings, Jesus, is our king. And I know that you're sitting there going, well, we can't see his kingdom. I can't feel his kingdom now, but that doesn't mean that he is not on the throne. Jesus is on the throne, and we are his people. We're under his mighty hand. You can protest that all you want. You can protest God being God all you want, but Jesus is still king. The point in me sharing this and showing this is that we have a culture that's obsessed with personal freedom. They just want to do whatever they want, whenever they want to do it, and do it with whomever they want to do it. I've mentioned this over and over again, but that's not good. What if personal freedom is not the highest value, and actually personal freedom is not even really good for you? This idea of doing whatever you want, whenever you want, to whoever you want is not actually a strategy for an abundant life. Jesus even mentions something like this when he says, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. Luke 9:23. It's not about you. It's not about personal freedom. It's not about doing whatever you want to do. It's about following Jesus, who is the King of Kings. But of course, we can't do this as a society because we hate God and we hate authority and we hate the idea of anyone telling us there's something we can't do. This is the have it your way generation, and of course, you want to just do whatever you want immediately. Anyone who says otherwise is to be attacked. That's just the reality of the world that we live in. It's not a good thing, and of course, it's not Christian. These protesters, these rioters, but I repeat myself, are only bringing chaos, and they clearly have no interest in order or any justice. This idea of no kings, this mass protest that they are going to hold potentially today, depending on when you are listening to this, is just an anarchistic method of tearing down society and replacing it with absolutely nothing. That's a problem in a Christian society. Okay, now, all of that as a foundation, let's talk about immigrants. Now, I have to start in this place. Did you know that I love immigrants? I do. I love immigrants. In fact, I love immigrants so much, I married one. That's not actually a joke. My spouse is from another country and went through the long and tedious and arduous process to become an American citizen. So I have firsthand information, or at least secondhand knowledge of how this whole thing works. My sweet wife went through this entire process. It was a difficult process, and it was worth it. We now face, as a nation, millions of people who did not want to go through this process and instead broke laws and bent rules for their own selfish gain. So, as a Christian, how are we supposed to think about illegal immigration? Illegal immigration. Some points on this that we should go through. I'm going to hit about 10 of these as we go through. I may or may not number these. I know y'all like lists, but this was just some things that I've been thinking about as I've been discussing and processing through this on my own. Christians are commanded to love immigrants. That's absolutely true. Many people on the left or Christians who are confused point to verses like this. Leviticus 19 has a verse about this that says you're supposed to love those that are immigrants around you. And regardless of policy or law or whatever, we are to love individuals because they were created by God. That's true. We are to love people. However, and this is a big one, this does not mean Christians should oppose the enforcement of just laws, which is exactly what these protests and riots are doing. These protests and riots are trying to say that regardless of how people got here or whatever laws they broke on the way to getting here, that doesn't matter because we should love them and just forgive them and let them do whatever they want. Of course, that's ridiculous, and we don't do that for any other laws on the books at all, and we shouldn't. We should enforce the laws that are on the books. There are immigration laws on the books, and we should not just throw those aside because, quote unquote, love. That doesn't make any sense. It's not Christian. That's not the way that any of this works. Second point, God establishes borders. This makes people really cringy. They think, well, we're in one world and God is the king of, and Jesus is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and he's the king of the whole world. So we shouldn't have borders and nations. But of course, that's not true, and it's never been true. God has divided the world into nations. Genesis 11 has that. God does establish borders still in the New Testament. We hear that in Acts 17. There's more of that discussion in the Old Testament again in Deuteronomy 32, specifically around verse 8. And God led people to build walls to protect their people. What was he wanting them to be protected from? Things like outside forces, influences, and even religions. Read through the Old Testament at some point and realize that a lot of the walls, borders, even fights that the Israelites got into were because the people around them were godless pagans and would lead, or sometimes did lead, the Israelites, the Jewish people, the people of God, into other pagan religions doing horrible and gross and idolatrous practices. God does not want that. God even mentions in the Old Testament that he is a jealous God. So we can't live in that way and expect to flourish as a society. That's just not the way the kingdom of God is structured. The problem in America right now is that building walls and enforcing borders feels unloving. So this is what people point to. I've heard Christians point to, well, it's unloving to build walls. It's unloving to enforce borders. It's unloving to enforce laws. But is it actually unloving? Is it unloving to have borders? We hear this objection about walls and borders, something like building walls and enforcing laws is hateful. But this is misplaced empathy. And of course it is. Nations build walls for the same reason you lock your front door throughout the day. You don't hate the people outside your house. You love the people inside your house. That's just evidently true. Of course it is. And you all do it. You can say, well, I leave my door unlocked and anyone can come in. But that, of course, is not true. If someone came in and started wreaking havoc and taking all of your things, you would have a far different opinion immediately. And of course we all would, because we love the people inside and want to prepare and plan and provide for the people inside our homes more than the people outside our homes. And you don't have to hate the people outside to do that. You just love the people inside more. And we have a legal immigration process to make sure that those that come in are people that will be good for our country. Not that come in and want to cause chaos and disorder and destruction to our communities, such as, and I looked this up just a few minutes ago, the 750 plus MS-13 gang members who have been captured in the past couple of years. That's only the ones that have been captured. Hundreds and hundreds of violent, terrible gang members, and that's just a small smattering, according to some of the statistics that you can see out here. Of course, it's hard to determine because most of the people, and it appears to be in the millions, who have crossed the border illegally have not been registered in any way, and we have no idea who they are or what they've done before. That's not a healthy situation for a healthy society, and that shouldn't be. It shouldn't be controversial at all. We want the best for those that are living here, and bringing in the worst of humanity is not the best for those that are living here. Again, now, on another stance, America, out of the top 10 countries, if you run some reports, brings in the most legal immigrants than any other nation. If you're just listening, Sweden is at the bottom of this list in number 10, bringing in about 100,000 people per year through legal immigration. America is at the top of the list, bringing in over 1 million people per year in legal immigration. We're not even talking about illegal anymore. This is just the people that we think are good for the country. That's a lot of people just generally. And the problem is most legal immigrants overwhelmingly support the enforcement of immigration laws. And of course, you would too. Do you hate waiting in line? How about waiting in traffic on the road? Do you ever get road rage? Do you ever get frustrated with those that cut you off in line or use the shoulder to avoid traffic? Here's a really deep question. Do you secretly or not so secretly hope there's a cop up ahead so that the traffic lawbreaker that goes and skirts the whole line, you think they should get busted? Do you think that? This is the same thing. We're talking about the same thing. Illegal immigration is like some people cut the line and use the shoulder to avoid traffic entirely. But there are also people today all over America, even some quote-unquote Christians, who are arguing they should just be given a pass because we quote-unquote love them. Is it loving to all of the other immigrants who did go through the process and wait in line to do things the right way? Of course not. It's not loving to those people. You've just said, suckers, like, hey, you did the process, but I don't have to. I can do whatever I want to do. Of course, that's just not great. And I would say not loving. So then we get things, and people say things like, hey, the Bible says love the immigrant. And I agree. That sounds nice. It's wonderful, but what is love? This is misapplying scripture. This is a category error. As we mentioned, there's legal and illegal immigrants. They're not the same. They're not the same category at all. You can love people by showing them justice as well as mercy. I know we're all saying love means just letting you do whatever you want to do, but what if loving someone is actually doing what's good for them and the rest of society by enforcing the just laws, which is the whole point of government in the first place? If you break a law, you should receive justice. Not only is it good for the rest of society, this is a tough one that our society doesn't like to hear, but receiving justice, receiving punishment is actually good for you. Once again, every parent knows this. No parent likes disciplining their children, but even God says the Lord disciplines those he loves. What does that mean? It means that he loves you so much, he's not going to let you do silly and stupid things. He will discipline you into better action and better motives because he loves you, and he's not going to let you just spiral yourself into infinity. We should all understand this, and this is how governments are supposed to be created and run, that we use the system of justice, we use the rule of law to enforce the laws because they're not only good for those that are hurt, they're good for the offender as well. So the actions taken by law enforcement throughout the country are in direct response to those who have not followed laws. They have entered illegally, and you can have all of these sob stories, and some of them are terrible stories of lives being disrupted, but the reality is they did things the wrong way. They came in the wrong way. You can notice on the news, no legal immigrants are being deported because they're not, because they did it legally. Those sent back to their own countries have not followed the process of immigration. And even at that, people are, being put on trains and planes and cars and being sent away. If you did this in another country, I won't even mention some of the countries. I was going to give some examples, but I won't. But I can tell you, just from research and stories, if you did this in some other countries, you may end up in jail for a long, long time or worse. in some of these other countries. If you just enter the country illegally, not find a job and do all this other stuff, you just go in illegally, you may find yourself in jail or worse in many other countries. We're saying, hey, we would like to, on our expense, send you away. Seems pretty nice. From a biblical perspective, we need to follow the scriptural guideline of the role of government, which we struggle to do here in this current culture, in this current spirit of the age. Romans 13 reminds us government exists to punish crime and uphold good. That is what the government is supposed to do. Under the Lord, in the law of God, the government is supposed to uphold the good and punish those that do injustice and are unrighteous. I know I say it a lot, but it does hold here that it's either Christ or chaos. Either government upholds the law and the entire society flourishes because we're in Christ and we're doing the right things for the right reasons, or the entire society descends into chaos. There's no middle way. Like, you can't have it both ways. You can't have it in the middle where you just follow some of the laws but not all of the laws. You really have to do the right thing. The culture has to be a moral culture. I mean, even John Adams mentioned this, like, this Constitution is fit only for a moral and religious people, because he knew we cannot follow the Constitution. We cannot live in a self-governing situation unless we are moral ourselves. Just from a point of reference, this idea of, quote, improper entry by alien, end quote, in other words, someone coming into the country illegally, has been a federal crime since 1929. This is nothing new. It's almost 100 years since this has been a federal crime. Illegal entry into a country is also not victimless. There are people, in fact, do I have this? Yeah. So there are a bunch of social media influencers who, I mean, I would guess, and I don't know, but I would guess have been paid for this whole thing, because they start sounding eerily similar. I'm going to play you this clip. I think there's some music in the background, so I apologize for that. Hopefully this doesn't get hit on the socials, but we'll see what happens. But just listen to what these people are saying, and then we'll unpack it.
Criminal one. You know what else is a civil offense? Jaywalking.
And being undocumented is not a criminal offense. It's a civil one. And if you've ever jaywalked, congratulations, because you've also committed a civil offense.
Have you ever sped over the speed limit? Have you ever drank or smoked underage? Have you ever drank and then driven a car? What about jaywalking?
Being undocumented in America is a civil offense.
Okay, that's all I can handle of that. I know that background music was ridiculous, but it goes on and on. All of these influencers, who, by the way, kind of look the same. And if you're just listening, they're not the same person. There's a bunch of different people in that. But their idea is that coming into the country illegally is just civil, and so it's just like jaywalking. And so if you've jaywalked, you've done the same thing. So first of all, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, and it's not true at all. Like, it's a federal offense, as I just mentioned. But beyond that, like, the problem is those two crimes are not the same, which is why we have courts and laws and penalties and punishments. Like, jaywalking is a crime. It is generally victimless, other than the person who is doing it, because you potentially would only hurt yourself, though that's not always true, because you potentially could hurt the other people that are involved as well, if someone ran into you, etc. But the reality is the price of illegal immigration is so much higher. Here's a quick chart for California. This is just healthcare costs in California for a quick period of time. This estimates that it's about $9.5 billion for the 24-25 calendar year in healthcare, and 8.4 of that billion came from the state. So, and by the way, at the time, California had a $30 billion budget deficit. So, I mean, even just that, California, which is an egregious violator of this idea, billions and billions of dollars are being spent on people who entered the country illegally that you, taxpayer, are paying for. So this is not victimless. You're paying for this. You're paying for their unhealth. What about, and I hate even bringing this up, and I'm not going to show pictures at this time, but there have been numerous rapes and murders of people that have occurred by illegal immigrants, which should be infuriating to everybody because they are 100% preventable. 100% of these murders, etc., perpetrated on young women were preventable by not allowing people into the country outside of the legal immigration process. These were illegal people, people that came into the country illegally, and so none of those would have happened if those people had not been allowed in. I found this as well in terms of drugs. We know that fentanyl has been a terrible problem at the southern border. Washington Post is just baffled. They cannot figure this out. Here's the headline from WAPO. The mysterious drop in fentanyl seizures on the U.S.-Mexico border. Mysterious. This is mysterious. I'll read a little bit more. The reasons behind the decrease of fentanyl seizures in the U.S. along the Mexico border are complex. We don't know. We don't know why. So I'll just tell you another stat. I won't show you the picture, but the fentanyl seizure, according to Customs Border Patrol, CBP, is at its lowest level since 2021, down 40% since just January. But the media is shocked and stunned. The reasons are mysterious. How could the reasons possibly have happened? We closed the border, people are no longer coming across the border, and the flow of fentanyl across the border stopped. My mind is blown. How could this possibly be connected? Of course it's connected. Cause meets effect. Like, close the border, people are not coming across the border with the deadly drugs, so the drugs are not coming across the border. But of course, the media cannot report this because that would admit that the border crossing illegally is a problem, not just the people that are involved, the drugs. I mean, that's not even to mention the sex trafficking and other things. Like, it's just a problem. So then you get objections like Christians should want to care for people. Of course, Christians want to care for people. Christians do care for people. But this should not be difficult to understand. We talked about this a little already, but let's go into a little more. Loving is not doing whatever you think is best. Loving is doing what is best. Do you see the difference? You could think that you should have 1 million lollipops a day because that's what you want and that's the best thing. It's clearly not the best thing. Everyone knows that. So loving you would be doing what is best for you, even if you think that you're wrong, right? In this case, the Bible makes it clear that leaders are to prioritize the people under their care over those that are not in their care. In other words, we should love the people in our country more than the people outside of our country. And man, this makes people so mad. You're probably fuming mad right now listening to this. But of course it's true. As a dad, this is obvious. I love my kids more than your kids. That may be upsetting to you, but it's just true. And you would say the same thing. And if you say something different, I was going to call you a liar. That's probably too harsh. But I know you love your kids more than my kids, and I'm okay with that. It doesn't bother me at all. And I love my kids more than your kids. That's just the reality. But here's the thing. I can still love your kids. I may even love a stranger's kids. All of that can be true, and probably is true, because I do love people. But I love my kids more. Every parent knows this. Everyone knows this is just instinctively true. It's the same thing as the door that I mentioned earlier. I don't hate the people outside my door. I just love the people inside my house more. So we look at this the other way around. If a dad did something for a stranger's kids that harmed his own kids, that doesn't make him a good man. It doesn't make him a man that's caring for society. It makes him a bad man and a terrible father. Community and the government are supposed to be modeled after the same principle. I mean, I saw this movie the other day where the dad just treated his children terribly, and it makes you just upset and angry and uncomfortable because a dad is supposed to take care of his kids. That is the role of a dad. That's the role of a mom. That's the role of a parent. And the nation should be the same way. If a nation's leader does things that benefit other nations more and hurts his own country, that is bad. That's a bad person. It makes them a terrible leader. This is an obvious principle, but for some reason, people have embraced these socialist ideas and communist ideas so much that they think hurting the ones you love to make other people feel better is somehow actually good, which is just wild and ridiculous, and we can't do that. It's not good. It's anti-Christian. Don't do that. Don't think that. Don't get sucked into the emotional manipulation that if you care for your family more, if you care for the citizens of your country more than other countries, you're a bad person. You're not. That's normal. That's how it should be. Even God reminds us in 1 Timothy 5:8 that anyone, any man, any father, any parent who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. That's 1 Timothy 5:8. Go and read it. What's the idea here? The idea is if you care for other people more than you're caring for your own family, you are not a Christian. You've denied the faith, and you're worse than an unbeliever. Even the unbelievers love their own families. If you are not loving your own family, something is wrong with you, and you're definitely not following Christ. So we have to keep these things in mind. We have to not be emotionally bullied by all of this. I'll give you a couple more. I've talked longer than I wanted to because that's what I do here. Jesus, here's a I don't know if you call it an objection or just a statement. People say that Jesus was an immigrant. I was going to go ahead and cut to the chase here. No, Jesus was not an immigrant. Like he never was. That's not true. It's not real. Jesus was not an immigrant. Here we go. Jesus never broke any laws because Jesus never sinned. So first of all, Jesus didn't break laws. Jesus did not break any immigration laws. And you're like, well, Jesus traveled to Jerusalem for the census. Yes, Jesus traveled in his country from his hometown to register in the national census. He didn't leave a country to go to another country. Read Luke 2. That's just what people did. They didn't have the internet, so they had to walk to the place where the census took place. Not an immigrant. Jesus traveled to Egypt. This is what people like to point to. Jesus traveled to Egypt, so he was an immigrant to Egypt. I am so sad for your education. I don't know how else to say this. There's this thing called the Roman Empire. I know this thing was going around where you're like, how much do you think about the Roman Empire? Apparently, I do think about it and talk about it every day. But Egypt, this may be a surprise to some. At this time, Egypt was in the Roman Empire. Yeah, I know. And so Jesus traveled to Egypt in the Roman Empire from a place that was in the Roman Empire. That's like going from Ohio to Texas. He's not an immigrant. That's not illegal immigration. And, spoiler, when people stopped trying to kill him, he went back home. Yeah, so it's not a legal immigrant, not an immigrant at all. And we can extend these principles even further back to Romans 13. Jesus commanded obedience to laws. Jesus in the Gospels even says, you can look this up in the Gospels. He says, if you love me, you'll obey my commandments. Jesus didn't sin, didn't break laws, commanded obedience to the commandments. So no, sorry. All of those are false. All of those are wrong. Don't be emotionally manipulated into like, oh, Jesus was an immigrant, so we're supposed to love all immigrants and just let them do whatever they want. Nope. Nope. I love them. And they have to follow the laws. So here's this one. I hear this. You shall not mistreat a foreigner. Exodus 21:22. This is correct. You should not mistreat a foreigner. That's true. And we are even to love our enemies. All of those things are true. How about this? Numbers 15 through 16. I'll counter your misquoted Bible verse. Numbers 15. The community is to have the same rules for you and, hear this part, and for the foreigner residing among you. This is a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. So from now all the way. You and the foreigner shall be the same before the Lord. The same laws and regulations will apply to both you and the foreigner residing among you. In other words, so that was Numbers 15. So in other words, the foreigner, the immigrant, the alien, whatever, must obey the laws of the land according to God and his kingdom of which we all live. The foreigner has to obey the laws of the land that they go in. You don't get to break the laws going in and then break whatever laws you want after that. That's, if you take the biblical view, you have to take the whole thing. You can't just take little parts and say, well, don't mistreat the foreigner. Correct. That's true. What does loving the foreigner mean if they're breaking the laws of the land that they're in? It means justice, AKA following the laws of the land they're in. Like, this is how it goes. Let's see. Do we have time for one more? I'll do one more. Man, I'm gonna get canceled and people are gonna throw stuff. I don't know what to tell you. I'm trying to be Christianly about this, and I'm tired of emotional manipulation. I guess that's what it is. Like, I have a heart. I'm probably much nicer in real life than on here. I don't know at this point. But we also have to have truth. We have to have grace and we have to have truth so that we're on the truth side, because the grace is so out of control. The love is so out of control that we have no truth, and truth is really important. So foreigners are not necessarily good for a nation. This is a very unpopular thing to say, but it's just true. In many cases in the Old Testament, God warns about the influence of foreigners upon the land. Why? Why does he do this? Because they will influence the laws, they'll influence the culture, they'll influence the faith, and even the economy of the citizens that live in the land. Deuteronomy 28:43. The foreigners who reside among you will rise above you higher and higher, and you will sink lower and lower. They'll lend to you, but you will not lend to them. They'll be the head, you will be the tail. All these curses will come to you. They'll pursue you, overtake you, until you are destroyed because you did not obey the Lord your God and observe the commandments and decrees he gave you. So we don't need to be mean. We don't need to be hostile, but we do have to uphold laws. These protests, these riots where people are just burning things down, saying that the lawmakers cannot enforce the laws, are just misguided. I understand the heart to love people. I have that, and I want to love people, but we also have to live in the laws that not only God has given us, but the country has provided. If you don't want to live in those laws, you don't have to live here. You can go somewhere else too, but you can't live here and not obey the laws. Like you have to take all of these things together. And again, we need to love with grace and truth. We don't want to become hardened people. We don't want to become hateful people, but we can't support chaos and lawbreaking. Both of these things are true. We can love people, grace, and we can tell them the truth by upholding the law and upholding the justice, because that is the order that God requires. Again, it's either Christ or chaos. That'll do it for me today. I'm Matt Odegaard, and this is Church Public. Thanks for stopping by. If you have made it this far, congratulations. This is the end of this podcast episode. You can subscribe. You can send it to somebody who's like, hey, what is this all about? How do I understand it? I would appreciate that. You can like and review and share if you're just listening on audio. You can see some of the videos by going to churchpublic.com or substack.com/@churchpublic.